The United States and Iran continue to send conflicting signals ahead of possible peace talks as the ceasefire deadline looms large. There are some signs of progress this morning. A foreign diplomat inside Tehran close to these talks telling MS Now that an Iranian delegation led by the country's parliament speaker and foreign minister will in fact travel to Islamabad today for negotiations with the U.S. Of course, they're saying they'd only do that if Vice President J.D. Vance is present. Two U.S. officials, meanwhile, tell the New York Times Vance is expected to leave Washington for Islamabad today. There had been some back and forth, driven in part by the president, who said, well, he's going, he's not going. Pakistan is also actively preparing for a second round of talks, deploying thousands of additional security personnel across the area. Both warring parties, however, are ramping up their rhetoric ahead of this potential meeting. Iran's parliament speaker posted to social media yesterday, quote, "We do not accept negotiations under the shadow of threats," adding Iran is, quote, "prepared to reveal new cards on the battlefield." President Trump, meanwhile, told Bloomberg he's, quote, "highly unlikely to extend the ceasefire if a deal isn't reached before tomorrow night Eastern time." And then when asked by PBS News what happens if this truce expires, the president said, quote, "then lots of bombs start going off." It continues to be high stakes. Thankfully, we have retired CIA officer Mark Polymeropoulos here on set. He's an MS Now national security and intelligence analyst. So, Mark, when you see the way the president is continuing to just ramp up these stakes, say that any sign of no more ceasefire will be met with even more aggression. You know, our mutual friend Nancy Youssef and I were talking yesterday about the ways that this administration keeps trying to make the most aggressive threat, and it's still not necessarily getting them where they want to be in terms of these negotiations, a non-nuclear Iran, all of the various explanations for why we're in this conflict in the first place, and yet the president keeps doing it.
So, Ali, it's interesting because I'm not sure that the president is as experienced in negotiating with the Iranians as he probably thinks he is.
Yeah.
You know, he makes a lot of these statements. I think there's people behind the scenes who are kind of wondering kind of about the bombast, if it's really going to be effective. And I think it's pretty clear from the Iranian side that it's not. I mean, they consider this as part of kind of the negotiations. It freaks out the rest of the world when he kind of predicts nuclear or, you know, or Armageddon, not nuclear. But I don't think it really does anything. And it does kind of start one thinking about the two different negotiating styles.
Yes.
You know, Trump is someone who is, you know, steeped in the world of business and real estate. But the Iranians are master negotiators. Think about, you know, a bazaar. Think about, you know, buying a carpet. When you come in, you storm out. You know, this is a long, drawn-out talks, and they have kind of this infinite amount of patience. And I don't think Trump actually has that. And it reminds me, a former CIA official who was an expert on Iran operations once said that when we recruit someone to spy for us, an Iranian, you know, you agree on a set salary. You're going to get $1,000 a month. The next meeting, when you expect to pay them, they say, well, no, hold on a second, I want $2,000. It's all part of this long, drawn-out negotiations. I think that's where we are now. And I'm not sure with Trump, with this kind of band of real estate folks around him, no Iran experts, no one from the CIA, no one from the State Department. I'm not sure they're as well suited to this style of negotiating.
Which, when you talk about the people who are at the table now versus the way that deals with Iran have been done in the past, you and I were talking right before we came on about the ways that the Obama-era JCPOA, the Iran deal that the president now pulled us out of and also regularly speaks negatively of, that had so many experts at the table negotiating it. It was complex. It was done over a very long stretch of time. This is not that.
Right. So that was a deal. Now, whether you like it or not, it still was a deal with, you know, hundreds, if not thousands of pages, multiple annexes. And it took almost 2 years to solidify. You also had CIA's top Iran experts, you know, in essence, in the negotiating room, you know, maybe not literally, but at least adjacent. And so that's what you need. Now, I think Trump is not used to this. He likes these big framework deals. That's might maybe what you get. But that, of course, does lend to the notion that the Iranians are going to draw things out, keep coming out with different conditions. And let's not forget that these other kind of framework deals from the past, whether it was Ukraine, Russia, or particularly the Gaza peace deal, nothing ever really materialized. I mean, the Gaza 20-point plan is only what points 1 and 2 have been agreed upon. So that notion of framework deals doesn't really apply. It's not effective. And then you end up being right back where we started from. And I think you're going to see that. I do think there's going to be an extension of the talks. Trump said no. You know, bombs are going to start dropping if there's not going to be success. I don't think he wants to go back to any kind of military activity. So I do think there'll be an extension, but it's going to be a drawn-out process. And the question is, did Trump have the patience to outlast the Iranians, and a lot of us have some doubt on that.
And so now we are in a place where we're watching as J.D. Vance is set to head to Pakistan. We're going to see these already tenuous talks, right? We've seen them be on again, off again. And now the question is, what, if anything, do they ultimately decide? But what it means when you're negotiating with this set of people is that for a conflict that began, and there were questions of, OK, is the goal regime change? You and I have talked multiple times here about the ways that this administration is now ending up with an Iranian regime that is more dug in, more entrenched, and frankly, more conservative and radical than they were prior. What does that say when you consider that this conflict began with the president saying to Iranian protesters who were killed by the thousands, we will be coming to help you effectively?
So what it looks like is going to happen is there will be some type of deal, and it's going to involve some compromise from the United States. And then you have to ask yourself, after Trump said help is on its way, and, originally we were there to help the Iranian people, 40,000 of whom were killed. Yeah. If we do a deal, and it might be a deal in which a lot of us will say, yeah, that makes some sense, you're going to have to ask yourself, well, wait a second, it actually strengthens the regime. If we give sanctions relief, for example, to the Iranian regime, obviously hardliners from the IRGC are now more, firmly entrenched. Are the Iranian people actually better off right now? And I'm not sure we can actually answer that question in a positive manner. And ultimately, then you say, why did we do this in the first place? If we're going to get a Obama-type JCPOA 2.5 deal, why the war? That has lasted 2 months, and 13 Americans are dead. The international economy has been really wiped out. And so, these are questions that have to be asked.
Yeah, exactly, especially when you consider such a broad landscape as the one that you just laid out, the economic impacts, the military impacts, all of it. You have to question, once it's over, and we're not there yet, right, what was it for? The other thing that we're watching is another round of in-person talks, these between officials from Israel and Lebanon. Those are set to take place on Thursday at the State Department. That's according to the Times of Israel, citing an Israeli and U.S. official familiar with the matter. Israel's ambassador to the U.S. is expected to attend those talks. Lebanon is reportedly sending its former ambassador to the United States after its current ambassador attended the first round of talks early last week. Those talks resulted in the ongoing 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon. Thursday's meeting would come days before that agreement is set to expire. We should note that Israel has continued attacks in South Lebanon, where it maintains a large military presence despite this truce. And again, this is something that is related to the Iran conflict, in that when these negotiations between the U.S. and Iran began, there was a question of, OK, we have to deal with Israel and Lebanon. The fact that they are sitting at a table is notable, the first time in decades that has happened. And yet, what do you imagine this ends up looking like with their own ceasefire coming down to the wire?
Well, I think this is a good thing. And, Marco Rubio, our Secretary of State, who has been relatively absent from the Iran war, has shown up, and he's taking a role in this. And this is the idea that, Israel and Lebanon have to come to some type of peace. Obviously, the Lebanese government, which is weak, has a huge task at hand, is how to disarm Hezbollah. And so these talks, I think, are a good thing. This was actually forced upon the Israelis. Trump actually told Netanyahu enough already. So let's see where this goes. But ultimately, this is one of those times where U.S. diplomacy actually seems to be working. And there is some hope in the region that we can come to a solution on this crisis, way different than with Iran. Ali, you made a great point on this, though, is that this was one of the preconditions for the Iran talks. The Iranian regime said there has to be a ceasefire in Lebanon. Trump made that happen. Give him a little credit on that. But let's hope that diplomacy reigns. And our good friend, who's come on the show many times and on Morning Joe as well, Hagar Shamali, who, she is so optimistic on this. That actually gives me some hope.
Yeah, this is one of the silver linings areas in a world that does seem, maybe to a casual viewer and sometimes to us, like it's on fire. And I wonder if we're right, and I think you might have just answered this question, to be looking at these two ongoing negotiations, ongoing conflicts as related to each other, riding alongside of each other.
Right.
That is right.
Yes.
Can you talk about then if one talks go well, which is to say Israel-Lebanon talks go well, like Hagar is so bullish about, does that mean that U.S.-Iran talks end up going better? I mean, what are the ways that these things actually intersect?
Well, I think it's interesting because if we end up, collectively defanging Hezbollah, and that's going to be a tall order, but that's, really ensuring Hezbollah does not play this disruptive role, that they do disarm, that the Lebanese government, the Lebanese military are empowered. I think that's a very good thing because that takes a card out of the Iranian playbook. Remember, Hezbollah is a proxy of Iran, and they've been used very effectively over the years. But if we can make some progress on the Lebanon track. That certainly is a good thing in our kind of entire counter-Iran strategy in the region.
It's really helpful to see you piece these things together, the strings that run across the region, why everything is so interconnected. Retired CIA officer Mark Polymeropoulos, who gave me an early "why are you awake?" I will say. He's up early because it's his daughter's 26th birthday. Happy birthday to Alexandra, as a fellow Alexandra. And Mark, thank you as always for coming on. We have one more story we want to get you before we go to break, because Labor Secretary Lori Chavez de Remer has resigned after a tenure marked by allegations of misconduct. The White House communications director posted this on social media, saying that Chavez de Remer was moving to a job in the private sector and praised her for her work with the administration. Deputy Secretary Keith Sonderling will serve as acting secretary. But here's the background. The New York Times reported in January that Chavez de Remer was under investigation after she was accused of having a romantic relationship with a member of her security detail. The New York Times also reported that month that Chavez de Remer had been accused in an internal complaint of having her staff make up official taxpayer-funded trips to destinations so she could come spend time there with family or friends. Both the White House and Chavez de Remer have denied those accusations. And then there was also this. In February, Chavez de Remer's husband was barred from the Labor Department's headquarters after two women accused him of sexually assaulting them. He denied those allegations. An investigation into them was closed after police found no evidence of a crime. But this is now the third cabinet secretary in several weeks that we've seen depart the administration amid scandal. Notably, all of them are women. Kristi Noem, Pam Bondi, and now Lori Chavez de Remer. Keep tracking this space.